Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of AMA's Marketing In. I'm your host, Bennie F. Johnson, AMA CEO. In our episodes, we explore life through a marketing lens, delving into conversations with individuals that flourish at the intersection of marketing and the unexpected. Through our episodes, we'll introduce you to visionaries whose stories you might not yet have heard of, but are exactly the ones you need to know. Through our thought-provoking conversations, we'll unravel the challenges, triumphs, and pivotal moments that have all been shaped by marketing. Today, my special guest is none other than Leah Chandler, the Chief Marketing Officer for Discover Puerto Rico. As CMO, Leah provides strategic marketing leadership for the organization, and it's under her leadership that the company has repositioned its brand and setting the stage for 4 stellar years of record tourism growth and performance. Prior to her move to San Juan, Leah was Chief Marketing Officer of Explore Branson, where she also led the growth of the community's tourism industry, repositioning it as a destination brand. Recently, this summer, Leah has the distinct honor of being named this year's AMA's Foundation's National Nonprofit Marketer of the Year. Please congratulate her and welcome her to our podcast, Leah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness. It is such a pleasure. I was excited that we could have this conversation when we received the official word that you had won the award. The first call we made was we wanted to have you on our podcast to really talk about the kind of energy and creativity that you've been able to lead in the last few years in your role at Discover Puerto Rico. Talk a bit about what you've done and what excites you about this current role in being Chief Marketing Officer for this tourism brand.
Gosh, there's so much, and we've had probably need 5 podcasts to go through all of it. It really is an incredible organization and one that is still relatively new as far as destination marketing organizations go. We actually, here in Puerto Rico, had legislation that was passed in 2017. It was bipartisan legislation that actually created, for the first time ever, a standalone private organization that would market tourism. So in the past, it's been tourism's been marketed by the government of Puerto Rico. So this really gave us an opportunity to rethink what tourism could do for Puerto Rico. I was the second employee hired.
Oh, wow.
Now we're up to a team of about 66 over the last 6 years, 85% of whom are Puerto Ricans and live here on the island. And it's really, I think, been a journey, starting in 2018 when we opened our doors, talking to consumers and wanting to first understand perceptions that people had of Puerto Rico, and realizing that perceptions were pretty neutral. A lot of people weren't thinking about Puerto Rico for vacations back then. And in fact, we saw in some research that there's about a third of the population in the U.S. mainland that didn't even know you don't need a passport to come to Puerto Rico. So that in itself is an exciting sort of blank slate for us to really think about how we want to reintroduce Puerto Rico to the world. Part of that is education and explaining, how accessible the destination is, especially to U.S. mainland travelers. And then outside of that sort of tactical message of access, it's talking about what makes Puerto Rico truly unique and special. And it is the Boricuas themselves, the people who live here in the island, who have, created this tapestry of culture, whether it's the music, the nightlife, the dancing, the food. You're going to find an experience here when you travel to Puerto Rico that you just can't get anywhere else in the Caribbean, or we think even in the world. And so it's an incredibly exciting brand to promote and market. And I literally wake up every day, and this is not, might sound cliche, but it really is true. I am so excited still after 6 years every single day to get up and market this destination.
Well, I think it's really powerful that you have this marketing challenge that many people face. You actually had a brand that was indifferent, right? It wasn't like people loved it or people hated it. They didn't even think about it. And to have that as a challenge, right? But then to be armed with such a richness of the brand.
Right.
We think about the food, the location, the experience. You really are right. You have a blank slate to kind of run through. So when did you first know that you were starting to make a difference?
I think in the hiring process, literally on those
Mm,
early days before we even opened our doors. And we were, our CEO, Brad Dean, and myself at the time, doing 15 interviews a day and starting to build out this team and realizing how unique and special each of these people were who we were bringing into the organization, that they were each so specifically gifted, so, distinct in what they were able to bring to the table. We were able to really find the perfect people for each job. And very seldom does a CMO get to have that opportunity. You usually walk into a position and you're
right.
inheriting a lot of the staff and you kind of work with what you have. Maybe a position turns over here or there. But in this case, we were able to be so customized in the, kind of the mission and the vision for the organization, and finding people who matched up with that ethos. And truly in those interviews, I thought, wow, something big is about to happen when we start seeing the talent that's coming through the door, and we
Right.
start, one by one building this team. And before we even started posting, the big numbers that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, I knew something big's about to happen.
It's so great when you can kind of feel it in its face. When I think about you being employee number two, it really leads to the conversation about partnership between the CEO and the CMO. And we hear a lot of kind of conversation about how does marketing get a seat at the executive table? How are we involved in decisions? You really were kind of a co-partner and engineer in building this out. Talk a little bit about your relationship with the CEO in helping you lead a marketing first organization.
Well, I'm very, very fortunate in the sense that I have I think the perfect scenario for any CMO is a CEO who gets marketing but doesn't want to do marketing.
Right.
And that's what.
Nice distinction there. I like the nuance, right?
I mean, honestly, every CMO probably fears that, you've got a CMO who gets it, and they want you to be successful in your role. But hey, I'd love to see that before it gets sent out, or hey, let me take a look at that ad. And that's just not Brad Dean. Brad Dean really understands, the bigger picture, the mission of the organization. He's got, very specific roles and relationships that he's managing. I spoke to Brad for the very first time during a phone interview back in 2018. And he actually asked me, he said, what is the most important thing that you need from a CEO? And I said to him, I said, I need someone who will take the bullets. As a CMO, especially, in an organization that's kind of quasi government, you're going to have
Right.
supporters, you're going to have detractors, you're making a case, you're building out this organization, trying to explain what it does and the impact it has. And in order for me to be able to truly concentrate on the marketing and the results of the marketing team, you have to have a CEO who can handle all of the other stuff, so that you're not getting pulled into conversations that, are distracting you from your objectives. And in that conversation, I remember him also talking about this opportunity to create this new destination marketing organization. And he referred to it
Right.
as a mission. It wasn't a job.
Mm.
It wasn't a career move.
Uh-huh.
It really was a mission. And I was immediately kind of stopped in my tracks. And it's something that I've, talked to every single person I've hired in the 6 years since that conversation, to understand that,
Right.
yes, it's about heads and beds, and yes, it's about revenue, and yes, it's about economic impact. But at the root of what we do every day is the people of
Right.
Puerto Rico. And how are we bringing prosperity to the people of Puerto Rico through that transformational power of tourism, right? So Brad and I really built our relationship on a lot of mutual respect and this shared vision for Discover Puerto Rico,
Right.
and what it could be and how it would impact the island.
And it sounds like from what we've seen and what we've experienced in our conversations that those deep relationships continue not just with the CEO and the CMO, but through your staff and the community and the business that are around, as multiple points that are tied into exploring this mission. How has the community changed since you all started? You go from not having any real brand marketing support to now you're driving, as you said, heads and beds and tourism and interaction and hiring people. How has the community responded?
We've had a very positive response from the community overall. And I think, like any destination today, very different from 10 or 15 years ago. If you're a DMO who's not thinking about the impact of tourism on the locals and the people who live
Right.
here, you are doing a disservice to your organization in the long run. And you're also doing a disservice to the destination itself. That resident sentiment is more important today than it has ever been. If you're a destination marketing organization or a convention and visitors bureau and you're just thinking about generating tax dollars, how do we get more people? It's volume, volume. You're in the wrong business, because that's not the way forward anymore. We have to be thinking about how we protect our environment. We have to be
Right.
thinking about things like over tourism. And it's not just
Right.
environmental sustainability, it's cultural sustainability. In a destination like
Right.
Puerto Rico, it's how do we honor the people who live here? How do we make them feel pride in the marketing that we're doing? And the main way we do that at Discover Puerto Rico is by including them in the conversations. When we launch a creative campaign, we're not just doing surveys with the people in the mainland or in our international markets and talking to consumers. We're talking to locals and not just stakeholders, right? Not just the board members. We're also talking to regular people who live here every day and whose lives are
Right.
impacted by tourism. Today, we have more jobs in the tourism and hospitality sector than we've ever had in the history of Puerto Rico's tourism industry. That's the kind of impact that a destination marketing organization who's focused on the community and on the people who live here can have. And I think the other thing about community here and how the DMO has really helped solidify the relationship between us and the people who live here is by being very true and authentic to the marketing we
Right.
do. So when we talk about creating a new campaign, we're shooting a new spot, we're not only using local talent,
Right.
our wardrobe is purchased by local designers. We're using jewelry from local jewelry designers. All of the cast is and the crew are going to be local. And again, 85% of our marketing team is local.
Right.
So in order to truly say, we're leaning into authenticity and we want to be true and organic to the brand, you got to walk that walk, right? And
Right.
and so that's been a big focus of our organization from the beginning.
When we think about, you're relatively, you've been in this role for 6 years, but relatively new to Puerto Rico. So you have the experience of coming into the marketplace, in the community for 6 years. As you go through your job every day, what are the things that still surprise you and you explore and when you're in Puerto Rico or San Juan or the community around? Are there still kind of moments and stories, restaurants and features that surprise you?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, the island is just packed with, I mean, and I'm going to sound like a real marketer here, but it truly is like this
Yes.
amazing blend of culture that is like I mentioned before, it's the food and it's the music. There's also the natural wonders. We have the only rainforest in the US forest system is here in Puerto Rico. There's
Yeah.
5 bioluminescent bays in the world. We have 3 of them here in Puerto Rico. I mean, we have 7 different ecosystems, a dry forest. I mean, you could literally spend every day traveling around this island and never see every nook and cranny. And that
Right.
that is a marketer's dream. I'm never waking up in the morning and saying, "Gosh, wish we had more stuff to promote." We've got a kind of an embarrassment of wealth and riches here in Puerto Rico in terms of tourism product, and it gives us a lot of space to work in when it comes to creating campaigns and promotions and activation. So yeah, I love being out exploring the island. Food is probably one of my favorite areas to explore. There's always a
Yes.
lot of the food scene here is growing exponentially, and our chefs are becoming more highly awarded and more acclaimed. And we love to talk about that with our marketing efforts.
I'd be remiss if I didn't call out this point that you are going to be the only podcast guest ever that will have said bioluminescence. think I think I can go out on a limb and say that, and so fitting in the space in there.
Awesome.
When we think about Puerto Rico's rich history and its kind of connections back to community, do you find that there's stories that are happening there on the island that connect to communities in the rest of the states that provide a connection point for people?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, one of the interesting connective threads is the number of Puerto Ricans who actually live in the US mainland. So
Right.
we have a huge diaspora population in the US. In fact, more Puerto Ricans live in the mainland than actually live here in Puerto Rico. So you have those stories and those generations really transcending the miles between Puerto Rico and the mainland. But I think there's a story of connectivity for anyone, even if you're not a part of the Puerto Rican diaspora.
Right.
You can find relevancy in, the experiences that people have here in the island, whether that's farming, whether it's cooking, whether it's, being a tour guide. I mean, there are a lot of different stories here in Puerto Rico that make the destination unique. I mean, we think that the people, the Boricuas themselves, are the ones who bring the destination to life without the unique narratives of the people who live here. We're just like any other destination with, shopping and nightlife and restaurants. And the people of Puerto Rico are what really sets us apart from other destinations.
It's really powerful that you've built a kind of new model around tourism marketing in space where there's a conversation about equity, there's a conversation about economic empowerment and business development that all go hand in hand. And I think it's really powerful that you're touching on those points, which sometimes are dispersed, that sometimes are not connected in there. You're actually, committed to growing business in the island. How has that helped the organization grow in your relationship to helping businesses grow?
Well, I think the biggest thing and probably the easiest thing in terms of helping businesses grow is providing them with the tools that helps them do their job better or makes their jobs easier.
Mm,
And as a destination marketing organization, we have opportunities to do that daily. One of the great examples of really living that opportunity is what we call La Idea. And IDEA stands for the Island Digital Education Academy. We launched about 2 years ago. We hired local university students, trained them on the major travel platforms like TripAdvisor, Google My Business Listings, and Yelp. Those, what we call digital gurus, then went out and met one-on-one with tourism businesses to first assess how they were showing up in those spaces and then training them and giving them the tools to improve their footprint in those spaces. These, and like probably many business owners, and the business owners here are running their business. They're not all necessarily marketers.
right.
So us being able to give them those basic tools to
Right.
be able to improve, the way people can find them on the internet and the way they're showing up in those spaces is a massive step forward, not just for that business, but it's that rising tide lifts all boats, and
Right.
that the island's tourism industry as a whole is able to collectively grow when those tourism businesses grow. We were able, we have 78 municipalities here in Puerto Rico. In 2 years, we were able to activate this program in all 78 municipalities, impacting about 6,000 local businesses and ensuring that
Wow.
they knew how to access those platforms. We helped them. We provided them with new assets for those platforms. So we hired, local photographers who would go out and take photos and videos of those properties and then uploading them into, the Google Sphere, for instance. So that's a very, very tactical way that we're able to
Right.
impact the success of local businesses, which in turn, creates success for the organization and ultimately the island.
Right. It's a really powerful way of taking the overall strategy and mission and delivering in such ways that are tactical, practical, and impactful
Exactly.
for your audience that you have. You're in a space where you're kind of quasi-governmental. So you're in a space of kind of public-private partnership and engagement. What are some of the things that you've learned from kind of navigating that space, right? I think it's, for many of us who are listening to the call, it's unusual to understand how you work with government, nonprofit, and private industry at the same time.
Sure. And Discover Puerto Rico is a private organization. It's the way we were established, but we do receive funds from the government of Puerto Rico, which is where that quasi component comes in.
Right.
We also, in the past few years, have received federal funds in the shape of, the American Rescue Plan funds, et cetera, throughout the COVID pandemic. It's obviously very important that in a scenario that like the one that we're in, that we're able to stay connected to government officials because we have complementary responsibilities.
Right.
In our case, the Puerto Rico Tourism Company, which is the government arm of tourism, is responsible for things like airline and cruise development. So they're in many cases meeting with the airlines, trying to grow the number of seats that are coming into Puerto Rico, building new routes. For instance, Denver, we secured for the first time ever a direct flight from Denver on United that started last October.
Oh, wow.
Exactly, right. And that kind of stuff, if we're not working hand in hand with the government on that, we're missing out. It's important. We obviously need airplanes in order to get people to Puerto
Right.
Rico. There's only a couple ways to get here. So if for us to be able to, work collaboratively with the government, we're generating that demand and they're saying, hey, Discover Puerto Rico, we're going to make sure we're getting those seats for you to fill. So again, it's very complementary roles. We stay close to many government agencies in Puerto Rico, including the
Right.
governor's office, to ensure, we're aligned on mission, that they
Right.
have talking points related to the success of tourism in Puerto Rico, and that they're able to speak to how we're growing jobs on the island. So certainly, one impacts the other. One of us can't do our jobs without the other one. So having
Right.
that kind of collaborative spirit is really, really important.
So I'm going to take you off of the island for a second and we're going to go to the air.
Okay.
We were talking before about how much we travel and flying around. So what drew you to the travel industry as
Oh,
both
wow.
kind of mission, work, and practice? What drew you in?
Well, I mean, probably most simply, it was vacationing as a kid. And a lot
Okay.
of, I lived in the Midwest. I grew up in Indiana. We didn't take a lot of vacations. When we did, we would, maybe go to Florida or to Myrtle Beach, and they were mostly road trips and driving, drive to destinations. But imagine a kid from the cornfields of Indiana seeing the ocean for the first time and having these experiences that are so
Right.
different from the ones that I would have in my day to day life. And I even remember taking a cruise when I was about 9 or 10, and getting for the first time to experiences cultures that were so different from yours. And it really was
Right.
very exciting to see people who are different from you and try food that's new to you. And I think that was something that always stuck with me. My mom tells me that I cried at the airport when we had to fly back home after
Oh,
going on
wow.
that cruise, because I didn't want to leave. I guess that kind of stuck with me. I do see, tourism does have the potential to change lives. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier the Student Youth Travel Association, SIDA, which I've been involved in for several years. When you see kids going to new destinations that,
Right.
children who don't have the chance to travel very much, and they are going and being exposed to cultures that are different from them, it opens their minds. It really has the potential to break down barriers, when you
Right.
travel. And so that's something that has definitely stuck with me. I still see that today, and I think our world, and certainly the U.S. mainland, like, we need that more than ever for people to be exposed to people who are different from them. And so that has been a part of my ethos, my personal brand, as I've continued in the tourism and travel industry, and where we see the potential for impact.
Wow. So deeply personal question. As you travel, as you live in a destination, one of the top in the world, what's your favorite go-to vacation spot that's not Puerto Rico?
Wow, that's a tough question because I do spend a lot of my time off in Puerto Rico vacationing. I recently went for the first time to Ireland,
Okay.
and that was this spring, and it was amazing. I had a wonderful trip in Ireland. That is a place I would go back to and explore more. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, so I wanted to see
Nice.
a lot of locations where Game of Thrones was filmed, which leads to sort of my next bucket list destination, which is Croatia. So that's
Okay.
another place I want to go and check out more Game of Thrones locations. But I've got a bucket list that would surprise you that I haven't seen a lot of sort of the iconic locations and destinations in the US. I've never seen the Grand Canyon. That's
Right.
one that's been on my bucket list for a long time. So, but I'll tell you, when you live in a place like Puerto Rico, it's hard to get really motivated to go
It's
other
it's
places.
hard. And I knew that when I asked the question. I was like, this is going to be hard.
It really is because, again, growing up in the Midwest, you always were trying to go to warm weather destinations
Right.
for a vacation.
Right.
People are excited to get to the beach, especially in the winter time, which seems to be getting longer and longer.
Right.
And you want to feel the sun, you want to drink a pina colada. And now I live in that place. I in fact live in the place that invented the pina colada.
Right.
So it's hard to get excited about leaving.
So, what do you find is the best brand ambassador for the work that you do? What what draws people in the most?
Well, I may sound repetitive here, but I do think it is the people. I think the people of Puerto
Mhm.
Rico who live here, no one is more passionate about the island than the people who live here. Like any destination, Puerto Rico is not without its challenges, but overall, I mean, if you've been here, and I know you have, Benny, and you arrive to the island on an airplane, and everyone starts clapping.
Yes.
And someone said to me, actually, it was last week, they said,
Yes.
"Oh, I guess people clap because they're happy that they landed safely." And I said, "No, that's locals who are clapping and they're excited to be home, right?" So you leave and go anywhere else, but coming back to Puerto Rico, there's nothing like it. And I think that excitement that locals have and that love and passion locals have for the island, it bleeds out into every connection they have with people off the island.
It is, and it's contagious. And every time you're in there, you
Yeah.
don't even question. You're clapping along too. You're like, yes, I have no idea why we're clapping, but I'm happy too.
I'm in it. I'm here.
Which is the fun that's facing there. So there's been a lot of new development lately happening in Puerto Rico. How are you able to be on top or anticipate what new developments are having as you balance that with like the core traditional spaces?
Well, I think, we talk about our different audiences
Right.
often. And, we have people who are very, very familiar with Puerto Rico who have been here many times.
Right.
And then we have new audiences. Denver's a great example of a
Right.
market we haven't been in before. So when we go into new markets, or as we call them, emerging markets, we sort of have kind of a 1.0 entry level messaging that is
Okay.
very general when it comes to sharing. Okay, we have beach product. Yes, you can have a cocktail at a resort. We're trying to make sure people in those emerging markets understand that we can compete with any of those other tropical destinations maybe you've been to in the past, whether it's the Dominican Republic or it's Jamaica or it's Miami.
Right.
So we have to first help those people who are newer to our brand understand that we can compete with those destinations. By the way, we have a value proposition that many of them don't have, which is the no passport required. So that's kind of our 1.0 baseline messaging for new markets. When we get into those markets who know us much better,
Right.
like a New York, a Boston, most of our Florida markets, then we have kind of a 2.0 and 3.0 creative messaging that
Okay.
is deeper, rooted in culture. It is showing newer product. It's things
Right.
that if you've already been here and you've done the bio bays and you've done the rainforest and you've been to Old San Juan, here's what's new and exciting that you haven't checked out yet, or here's a little bit more depth about what locals are doing that maybe
Right.
you want to try on your third or fourth visit. So we really do try to match the message to the audience based on the level of awareness and familiarity that people have with the island.
Talk a little bit about the insight work that went into that opening phrase, that opening message 1.0, that you have this destination that doesn't require a passport. I thought that was really powerful when you talked about building it out and that being a key entry point for people.
Sure. It's again, surprising but true that a lot of people don't understand that a passport isn't required to come to Puerto Rico, that we are a U.S. territory, et cetera. So that is a very unique selling proposition for the island. We did have some research that was conducted that solidified those numbers and helped us to understand that access needed to be a bigger part of our messaging than what it was at first. We've always had a no passport required sort of stamp
Hmm.
in our advertising,
Right.
but after receiving that research, we realized it needed to be more front and center. And then, in fact, we launched last fall a no passport, no problem messaging campaign, not
Nice.
necessarily a creative campaign, but really hitting hard on earned media, really hitting hard on our owned channels about the accessibility of the island. And it's not just no passport is required. It's also, hey, did you know you're going to use US currency when you get here? And in most of the main tourism areas, people speak English, and you're going to have an experience that is going to provide you with some of the comforts of home if you
Right.
need them. If you
Right.
need to go to a Walgreens and pick up a prescription, you can do that here.
Right.
But at the same time, you're going to feel this huge departure in culture from the US mainland, where you're going to experience new food, and you're going to experience dance and music and architecture that's different from what you've seen before. So you have kind of that comfort and convenience of a US destination with a culture that is very, very international.
Right.
And I think that combination is something you're not going to get in any other, Caribbean island.
It's so true. And one of the things I'd love to talk about, you're marketing in an age of creators and influencers, some big, some small. As you've been in your role, how have you seen your actual customers, tourists, become allies in promoting your brand and the experience? We know that in some of the travel that we're seeing, you know, the gram and the TikTok post are really making the message.
Oh, absolutely. And we see it in our metrics that people are searching on TikTok more for travel inspiration ideas than they are for, searching in Google, right? So that trend has been happening for the last couple of years. So we have to be in that space. And there really is no better ambassador for the island outside of the people who live here
Right.
than visitors who have experienced the island and have had an incredible time, and they're sharing it in real time. So we absolutely find influencer marketing to be a very important piece of our overall marketing matrix. It's getting more and more important, and
Okay.
we're
Right.
investing more in that than we ever have before. I think you're only going to see that continue to grow. It's especially useful if we've gone through a significant challenge in 2020. We had earthquakes at the beginning of the year,
Right.
and you want to get people on the island as quickly as possible to help them understand which areas of the island have been impacted.
Right.
And hey, the majority of the island hasn't been impacted. And now you're seeing people on the ground in real time who
Right.
are able to maybe combat what could be a negative message that's playing out in mainstream media. So it's not just a nice to have in terms of branding and awareness, but it can be a very, very tactical tool when it comes to showing areas of recovery if needed.
Well, I'm going to pivot a little bit because you said something before about travel and experience and your way of living in Puerto Rico. I'm going to ask the question about food because food incredibly bonds us together. So, what's your go-to dish now? What excites your palate?
Sure, I've had this twice in the last couple of weeks, and it's pagaito, which is a rice that gets kind of not burnt, but very crispy at the bottom of the pan. And so then it mixes in with the
Oh,
regular rice. And there's usually, some
oh,
kind of
yes.
protein. It might be, a chicken, or it might be blood sausage in some cases. It is the most flavorful dish I've ever had in Puerto Rico. I love, love, love that. It comes usually with like a side of rice and beans, which I love. Yeah, the food scene here continues to get elevated more and more, but at the same time, you can go to a local kiosk like in Luquillo
Right.
that's east of San Juan, and have a beer on the beach with a bacalaito, some fritters. And it's they're both equally satisfying,
Right.
to go to a very high end restaurant with a celebrity chef, or, a restaurant with no sign above the door that locals are frequenting. And that's a really, really cool phenomenon that's been evolving here in Puerto Rico over the last 5 years.
It's so true. I think of the last time we were there and I had my friends, giving me a hard time because I went to the fancy spot and then they said, like, you need to come with us so we can tell you the next spot to go. And it was the same dish and it was incredible in both spaces, but for different ways. But it was this love and pride and engagement in food as culture and experience that we had there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an incredible space in there. But I love the fact that so much of your world you speak about through the terms of food and culture.
Definitely.
So what are you most excited about as we get ready, we're halfway through the year and we start to turn into 2025. You've built a great foundation in the work you're doing with the organization. What are you excited about next?
For us in the past year, we've really worked hard to build out a lifestyle strategy.
Okay.
And for Discover Puerto Rico, that is our path forward. We, at the heart, are a travel brand, but where I think we're going in the future is that evolution from being a travel brand only to a lifestyle brand. It's great to connect with travelers when they're in the funnel and they're considering a destination, they're doing their research online, and hopefully they choose Puerto Rico. They come and they have an awesome time. They post about it on social media. Then they maybe don't think about you for 8 or 9 months until they
Right.
start planning their next vacation. What excites me is thinking about how we get connected with those consumers outside of the times they're
Mm,
planning for a trip. And a great example is, a partnership we did with Pantone a couple of years ago, where we created our own Pantone colors called Puerto Rico Sunshine, based on the calculations of the rays of sun in Puerto Rico. And it's this beautiful orange hue that
oh,
comes
that's
from the
brilliant.
sunsets in Puerto Rico. And we parlayed that into partnerships, for instance, with Ecos Paint. So now people are going to maybe a hardware store and they're seeing a paint can on the shelf that is Puerto Rico Sunshine, and they're maybe buying that and doing an accent while in their home. Now people are thinking about Puerto Rico outside of a trip planning window, right? And so that's where I think you really start to build brand loyalty. You really start to get into that zeitgeist of transcending travel and tourism and really focusing more on culture and meeting people where they are. Another great example was just a few weeks ago, we launched ice cream flavor with Van Leeuwen ice cream in New
Okay.
York City.
Oh,
So
wow.
we worked with them to create a pina colada flavored ice cream. This year, we're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the pina colada, and National Pina Colada Day was July 10th. So we worked with them to create an ice cream flavor. They sold out of it in 2 weeks. We did a big activation in New York, but back to community, we used a local mixologist. We worked with him to help create the recipe that was used by Van Leeuwen. We used Don Q rum, which is a local rum. The
Yes.
the art that you see in the packaging was a design that was done by a local artist. And so again, like bringing those products to life, most people aren't thinking about a vacation destination when they're buying ice cream, but
Right.
now they are. And I think that's what gets our team excited is thinking how we continue to activate and grow our space in a way that is beyond tourism and travel. And I think we see significant potential in that area, and you're going to see more from us in that space.
It's, a credible testament to the work and the creativity that you're delivering. We started our conversation saying that your brand premise had been pretty much meh, right? Your brand premise had been indifferent. And to move that to the way that you've gotten people excited about what was already an exciting, wonderful place, but to make that part of your brand energy and to see it show up in all these different markets and in our lives in different ways, I think is really powerful and speaks to this importance of marketing. I'd be remiss as we're talking about marketing in Puerto Rico to not mention the fact that we actually have several AMA collegiate chapters on the island, and some of the top-notch marketing students in the country are coming through the programs there. And it's really a testament to the work, the creativity coming out of Puerto Rico these days.
Absolutely. That's incredible to hear. And I just can't emphasize enough the talent in our team is, obviously I'm biased, but it
Uh-huh.
really is the best in the business. When I go to conferences with our Discover Puerto Rico team, I feel like they're celebrities. Everybody wants to talk to them about the work that they're doing for the destination marketing organization, and it's so powerful. It's so powerful to see that kind of talent come to life to help position the destination in a positive way that's going to really drive change here.
Well, I will tell you this, like I tell my team. You can be biased, but that doesn't mean you're not wrong. You're not right. And
Thank you. I
I want to give
agree.
you third party objective praise in the fact that, there's a reason why you were named AMA's Foundation Nonprofit Marketer of the Year. And thank you. It's been a pleasure having this conversation, and we can continue to talk, and we are, because I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to come and see you, and we're going to have the crispy rice dish together.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Which I think will be a ball. But, in looking at what's next, when we think about the power of marketing to meld with mission, the work that you've done in partnership with your chief executive officer, and the co-creation with government, community, business, and culture are really inspiring. Leah, I just want to thank you again for your work and your leadership, and congratulations on being the National Nonprofit Marketer of the Year.
Thanks so much, Benny. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining us. And for those listening, I'd be remiss if I didn't encourage you to check out Discover Puerto Rico. It's an incredible space, incredible island, incredible people and culture, and incredible marketing that's being led by our friend Leah Chandler. Thank you for joining us for this episode of AMA's Marketing In. I'm your host, Bennie F. Johnson. We look forward to you joining us again and being more involved in the American Marketing Association. Thank you.